For anyone who grew up falling asleep to the sound of "Good Night, John Boy" echoing through a modest farmhouse in Virginia, The Waltons wasn't just a television show. It was a ritual, a comfort, a family that millions of Americans considered their own. From 1972 to 1981, CBS aired what became one of the most beloved family dramas in television history, chronicling the lives of the Walton family through the Great Depression and into World War II. It won Emmys. It won hearts. And yet, behind the warm glow of that farmhouse window, the actors who brought the Walton family to life were quietly making decisions that would change the show forever. Some left because they were chasing something bigger. Some left because their bodies betrayed them. And some left because life itself intervened in ways no script could have prepared them for. This is the story of why they really walked away, not the sanitized version, but the one rooted in the actual record of interviews, obituaries, and the accounts of those who lived it. Let's start with a departure that shook the show to its core, because it involved the very heart of the series. Richard Thomas, the actor who played John Boy Walton, the eldest son, and the narrator whose voice bookended every single episode. Thomas was the emotional center of the show. He was the one writing in his journal, dreaming of becoming an author, embodying creator Earl Hamner Jr.'s own childhood memories, since The Waltons was based on Hamner's autobiographical novel Spencer's Mountain and his own upbringing in rural Virginia. Thomas won an Emmy for the role in 1973 and became, for a generation, the face of wholesome American storytelling. But by 1977, after 5 seasons, Richard Thomas made the decision to leave the show. The reasons were layered. Thomas had grown into adulthood on that set. He'd started the series as a young man in his early 20s and had, by the mid-1970s, become a husband and father. He wanted to expand beyond John Boy, to prove he could do more than play the earnest, bookish son from Virginia. Thomas has spoken in interviews over the years about wanting to avoid being permanently typecast, about the pull toward other kinds of roles and toward stage work, which he loved and which the demands of a weekly television series made nearly impossible to pursue. He also, according to accounts from that era, wanted more time with his growing family, having welcomed triplets in 1975 alongside an older daughter, a household that made the grueling schedule of series television even harder to sustain. His departure created a real problem for the writers, because John Boy wasn't a side character. He was the show's narrative spine, the voice that opened and closed every episode with reflections on family and hardship. The producers made the difficult choice to recast the role rather than write John Boy out entirely, first with Robert Whiteman stepping into the part for the later seasons, and the character's absence and reintroduction was folded into the story itself, with John Boy's fate as a soldier reported missing and presumed lost before his return. It was an unusual and risky move for network television, recasting a beloved lead character, but it reflected how much the show still needed the John Boy figure even without Thomas. What makes Thomas's exit different from a simple case of an actor moving on is that he didn't disappear from the industry or fade into obscurity. He went on to have a long, celebrated career in theater, winning acclaim on Broadway, and continued acting in television and film for decades afterward, later even returning to the Waltons universe for reunion specials. His departure wasn't a scandal. It was a young actor recognizing that 9 years, which was how long the show ultimately ran, could not be spent as one character, however beloved. Then there is the case of Michael Learned, who played Olivia Walton, the family's steady, moral, and often quietly suffering matriarch. Learned had already established herself as a respected stage actress before joining the Waltons, and she brought a gravity to Olivia that earned her 3 consecutive Emmy Awards for Outstanding Lead Actress in a drama series between 1973 and 1976, a remarkable achievement that underscored just how central her performance was to the show's success. But Learned, too, eventually chose to step away, and her exit was handled differently than Thomas's. Rather than being written out through recasting, the producers gave Olivia a storyline consistent with the historical realities of the era the show depicted. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a disease that was a genuine and terrifying health crisis in the early 20th century, and the character was sent away to a sanatorium in Arizona for treatment. allowing Learn to be written out of regular episodes for a stretch before her eventual, limited return. In real-world terms, Learned has discussed in interviews over the years that she felt the role, however meaningful, risked defining her entire career if she didn't step away to pursue other work. Like Thomas, she wanted range. She wanted to play characters who weren't defined by unwavering maternal patience. She went on to work extensively in film, television, and theater, and later took on the lead role in another hit series, Nurse, which earned her further Emmy nominations, proving that her instinct to diversify her work was, professionally speaking, entirely justified. Olivia's near-total absence in the later seasons was one of the more noticeable shifts in the show's final years, and longtime viewers often cite it as the moment the Waltons began to feel different, less anchored, because Learn's steady presence had done so much to hold the family's emotional center in place. Now we come to a departure that had nothing to do with ambition, contracts, or creative restlessness, and everything to do with the fragile, unpredictable nature of the human body. Ellen Corby played Grandma Esther Walton, the sharp-tongued, deeply principled matriarch of the older generation, a role that won her 3 Emmy Awards. In 1976, during production, Corby suffered a serious stroke. It left her with significant physical and speech difficulties, and for a period, she was absent from the show entirely while she underwent rehabilitation. What happened next is one of the more remarkable and humane examples of how a television production handled a real medical crisis affecting one of its stars. Rather than quietly writing Corby out or recasting the role, the producers and writers chose to bring her back once she had recovered enough to work, and, in a decision that reflected genuine respect for both the actress and the audience, they wrote Grandma's stroke into the storyline itself. The character was given her own recovery arc, mirroring Corby's real experience, complete with the halting speech and physical adjustments that Corby herself was living with. It was an unusually honest choice for a network drama of that era, one that didn't pretend the actress hadn't been through something life-altering, and it allowed Corby to continue in the role she loved for several more years, right up until the show's original run concluded, even though her health remained fragile. Corby's story is often cited by television historians as an early example of a production choosing authenticity and compassion over convenient recasting, and it's part of why The Waltons is remembered not just as a show about a family, but as a production that, in its own way, treated its actors like family too. That same spirit of loyalty and heartbreak defines the story of Will Geer, who played Grandpa Zeb Walton, the warm, wise, occasionally mischievous patriarch whose scenes with Corby's grandma were among the show's most beloved. Geer was already a celebrated stage and screen actor with a long and complicated history, having been blacklisted during the McCarthy era for his political activism, a fact that made his later career resurgence on the Waltons all the more meaningful to those who followed his life closely. In 1978, Will Geer died of respiratory failure at the age of 71. His death was not the result of a sudden accident, but came after complications related to a long battle with illness, and it marked the first time the production had to contend with the permanent loss of one of its leads. Rather than recasting Grandpa Zeb, the show made the decision to write the character's death into the storyline for the following season, treating Zeb's passing with the same gravity and grief that a real family would experience. It was, by the standards of 1970s television, an unusually somber and honest choice, and it permanently altered the emotional architecture of the Walton household on screen, just as it had in real life. Geer's death is remembered not only for what it took from the show, but for what it revealed about the cast's genuine bond. Multiple cast members spoke in later years about how close-knit the family had become off-camera, and how Geer's passing was felt not as the loss of a colleague, but as the loss of an actual elder in their extended television family. Beyond these headline departures, the show experienced a slower, quieter kind of erosion as it moved into its later seasons, one driven less by single dramatic events and more by the simple realities of growing up. Several of the younger cast members, including John Walmsley, who played Jason, and David W. Harper, who played Jim Bob, had joined the show as children and grew into adulthood on camera over the better part of a decade. As they aged, some pursued other creative interests. Walmsley, for instance, had genuine musical ambitions and used his time on the show to develop his skills as a musician, an interest that pulled at him increasingly as the series wore on. Judy Norton, who played Mary Ellen, and Mary McDonough, who played Erin, both stayed with the production for its full run but have spoken candidly in later interviews and in the broader oral history of the show about the strange experience of essentially growing up in public, on a set, under contract, during years that most people spend in far more private ways. By the time the original series concluded its run in 1981, the cast that remained looked meaningfully different from the one that had begun in 1972. John Boy was played by a different actor than the one who originated the role. Olivia appeared only sporadically. Grandpa was gone. Grandma carried the visible marks of what she'd survived. And the child actors who had once been genuinely children were now young adults, some already looking toward careers beyond Walton's mountain. What ties all of these departures together? Thomas's ambition, Learn's desire for range, Corby's stroke, Geer's death, the younger cast's simple growth into adulthood, is that none of them were driven by scandal, feuds, or the kind of tabloid drama that so often accompanies long-running television productions. Instead, the story of who left the Waltons and why is, in its own way, a reflection of the show's central theme, that families change, that people grow, that illness and death visit even the ones we love most, and that the passage of time is not something any of us, however strong our bonds, can hold back. Earl Hamner Jr., the show's creator, often said that The Waltons was never meant to be a fantasy of unbroken happiness, but a truthful portrait of a family enduring hardship together, drawing directly from his own Depression-era childhood in Schuyler, Virginia. In that light, the real-life departures of the actors who played the Waltons feel less like disruptions to the show's legacy and more like an extension of it. The family on screen weathered poverty, war, sickness, and loss. The family off